Aloha and hello. My name is Asia Iyer, and I'm here with the Maui Pono Network for another candidate interview for the election cycle of 2024. We are so excited to be able to bring these interviews to you. It takes a lot of our volunteer hours to put these together, but we are totally committed to making sure that the voters of Maui County are informed and have as much of the details and information and understanding that they need to make informed and well backed decisions when they turn in their ballot. And we are so pleased tonight to have Senator Angus McKelvey. He is with District 6, which covers a lot of the West Maui area. And he's actually been in office for a number of terms. And he was a state representative as well. So we are really pleased to have him tonight to be able to interview him. And we have Paul Deslauriers and Ann Pitcaithley and Bruce Douglas as our interviewers today. We might have Lucian Dene hop in as well. And again, my name is Asia Iyer. Before we start, I just want to remind you, you can check out other candidate interviews on our website, work.org. We have lots of other information. And again, we're just there to provide all the information that you need to make a good vote. And so as we begin here with Senator Angus McKelvey, I would love to ask you, what are some of the best things about being a civil servant elected official? It really is a service to us. And I know there's a lot of hard things about it. What is something that you really like? What keeps you coming back here into these election cycles and into the offices?
Well, it was first started with COVID and actually really hit home now. That's being there for regular folk, regular people when they desperately need the most. And if they need government for once in their life to work and to get some kind of clarity and accountability. I mean, for us and my staff, and I'm so blessed and grateful to have such an amazing staff stick through it. You know, during COVID, it was about processing PPP's process, about on the phone, moving paper literally to the convention center. And so people know there'd be a check that they'd be, you know, we had emails from one from a lady who was just in tears, literally saying, I was looking at Christmas, not being able to feed my daughter in the car, and your office came through and that check came in, and now we're going to have a Christmas. And same with the fire, you know, I mean, being in it elbow to elbow with everybody, I took it all personally. So I still do. But that's what keeps me going. And that's what, you know, despite everything else getting, the struggles that we all have here in Hawaii, personal ones, financial, everything else, that's what really just keeps me going. And, what's up with people like Junior calling me up on Sunday, 2 in the afternoon. But all joking aside, I mean, really, that's what, that to me is the, what I dedicate myself and what I try to do. And I guess, especially now, it's about trying to leave everything, making sure that nothing's left, everything's on the field, nothing's left off the field. And I think that's the, even if it means you're going to bruise a few, upset a few people and upset some apple carts, and maybe it's not the island way per se, but the end result is, again, regular folk getting taken care of, knowing that there's somebody there that's feeling what they're doing.
So I will ask the next question, Angus. Being so immersed there in the Lahaina district and that whole area, and as you were mentioning, really connecting with people on a personal level also, and yourself, having lost your home that you had also. I mean, again, to look at that level of connection and intimacy with the community, what are some of the things that you saw in terms of the way the process has happened that you felt were positive, and also those things that you felt are really holding back the community from moving forward, things that didn't seem right in terms of both federal and state support?
I could spend an hour on that. And throughout all of it, there was so many things that became I told you so, sadly enough. I use the analogy of a nuclear bomb right after the fire happened to bring to light the fact that if we don't tackle these other issues, these other things that we know were coming. That's the thing. There were other models, and I kept pointing to the Colorado fire because it was in the very early opening salvos was pointed that Marshall Fire is the Lahaina one, the closest to Lahaina. involving a phased recovery, involving toxic legacy waste, involving a wilderness fire that turned into an urban conflagration. All of the things that we're seeing now and saw then came to pass. And one of the biggest ones, I'm sorry, is somebody said you had a unique problem insofar as you could have literally done a Marshall Plan and bought your way out of this issue. But the way you guys are going about it and using bureaucracies and the COVID approach, which you have to, if you're having to take care of everybody, it's understandable. But when you're taking care of a group of very diverse socioeconomic people, that liquidity and agency would have been the best approach. And I really believe we've spent literally thousands and thousands of dollars for every dollar received. And then there's the whole role of the nonprofits and the amount of money received by them and where it's actually ended up and how many things got picked along the way. I mean, that being said, I think we're now finally approaching a place of being where we should have been, and things are moving finally in a way, but there's so much uncertainty, and that has to do with the future of Lahaina. As I said to Civil Beat, you know, the Lahaina I knew, the Lahaina that everybody went to sleep with or saw on August 7th, it'll never be that way ever again, at all. And so that's the struggle ongoing. I think the main thing is, though, is that government is finally starting to realize that community needs to be empowered into decision-making and have as much autonomy and control as they can get, because decisions made in Honolulu and Washington, D.C.'s predominantly cause a lot of the damage and chaos we see. The housing brokers were selected. The fact that they were being incentivized to put people in Paia and Haiku over West Maui. The fact that the governor didn't immediately, under martial law and emergency proclamation, get control of the short-term rentals and use them for housing before bringing the tourists back in. Which now all of a sudden now we're facing skyrocketing rents everywhere. FEMA fever has hit everything. And this comes on a backdrop of hyperinflation that's gripping everything right now. So, I mean, but these is what, and we have the things we talked about, insurance, that's happening. Underinsurance was never addressed. So many people were underinsured. They're not going to be able to rebuild. We needed a meaningful, if nothing else, a concessionary lending entity or a truly robust community trust. So if people are underinsured and have to sell, there's something there, so it doesn't turn into a speculator's dream. These are all the things that, you know, have come to pass, unfortunately. And now it's a matter of trying to right the ship. And the biggest thing is we need to have a concrete plan to bring people back to the West Side. And that's why I'm so aggressive on reclaiming and rebuilding. We develop affordable workforce housing within the burn zone area, right there where people can walk and hopefully to their jobs and live nearby in Lahaina and not have what happened before and now, which is everybody driving. So those are just some of the highlights of the things I think that have gone terribly awry. Had we followed the example of others, have we been willing to say best decisions are done here in the backyard, here in the community parks, let's use the experience of others to guide us rather than what may serve an interest or an agenda elsewhere. So much better could have been done. But right now, in my mind, coming up on 1 year, we owe it to just continue to look forward. Things are finally getting clean. Infrastructure is finally coming online, but we need real deadlines, real involvement. And one thing I got to say to the county that they've done is they're breaking up Lahaina into these subzones and having community meetings with these subzone areas, South Lahaina, North Lahaina, which is a step towards community planning and empowerment. But again, I hear about decisions that are being made elsewhere that are going to check this input. And so that's what's important.
I understand. There's so many different points that you made.
We go on and on and on and on. And you know, and the thing is, but we have to learn from the past. And we even I've made mistakes, especially during the session. You know, that going back, I could have done better, but we owe it to everybody to constantly self-critique ourselves. And and that's, to me, every government official should take the critiques as what they are, about trying to ensure that what needs to be done is getting done in a way that's transparency and accountability.
So I hear many things. You talked about disaster capitalism and how so many people have cashed in on that, and so little of that money goes to the actual residents who are in need. I also heard another thing about the housing. I mean, if you look at Kauai, within a month after Aniki, they had temporary housing up and going. And look where we are now in terms of that housing. In terms of, though, the way we're moving at this point in time, do you feel that those issues are being addressed, or there's so many people still in limbo and the unknown uncertainty with insurance and all these other things that it's still a mess?
We still have a lot of in limbo, especially with the insurance. ALE, additional living expenses, is going to be running out. A lot of people got placed in places that were well above what they should have been paying. A lot of people assume they could use it towards a rebuild, which they can't. I mean, there's many issues. You do have people in the Lima, Charlie, and other broker housing, but it's absolutely upended our communities. We saw it with a group of Keiki who came in just the other day from a school saying all of those Lahaina kids were all of a sudden there, and they were kind of a little hard on it. And I said, you know, just try to have some grace, but for FEMA, they wouldn't be living in your backyard. You know, and again, I tie it back to what in my mind, what Aniki did is they recognize it's a disaster. If we want to go ahead and reopen an affluent visitor economy, then we need to basically lock it down and clean and reconstruct and turn it into a construction economy for a temporary time period. So this trying to stand up a tourism economy in the midst of all of this from the very beginning, that early, has caused so many dominoes to occur. And you see with the traffic, I was just on the news for the other day, right? I mean, you've got visitors and all of the, as I like to joke, the tikis and everything else have got to come in, along with construction workers, and then people who are being forced to commute in every day from all these other parts of the island because of the housing situation. So they are, but in the meat, one of the things that happened that we had the state stepped in, and this is critical, is that the housing, there was an agreement with the county that the emergency response, and this is important for everybody to know, what contrary to what you hear the president, others saying, the feds are there, it's 100%, where the state of Hawaii, everybody are paying for everything up front in cash. And the hopes that there'll be reimbursements. And now, as you've seen with so many things, it's a lot about, well, maybe not, and maybe it's 50-50 or maybe no, instead of 100%. And so what's happened, one of the things was the agreement was the state will do this. We'll put up the money, especially for non-congregate shelters and that relief, if the county does the housing. But then the county appeared not to be doing the housing. So we stepped in at a cost of like $450 million to develop the modular housing behind Waihi'i area, Wahikuli up there in Lahaina. And including the infrastructure. The idea is we hope to use these modular homes to have a permanency, working with DHHL and Kali Watson to use them for beneficiaries. In my mind, it'll be great that beneficiaries could get a modular home and put it right on their lot to begin with and be able to, until they can get the financing and everything else to build their home. And so this, what we've created, I think will create some level of permanency. However, there are a lot of issues in procuring the modular units. The fact that we had to move so fast, we lost 2 critical months, which is why so many vendors had to be realized at one time. But I think this will provide housing opportunities in West Maui to the people that the state is responsible for. Again, FEMA and their people are in the interim direct lease housing. That's the housing brokers. The big concern for me and everybody is when these leases run out. And they were all set using STR, short-term rental day rates, which is why they're so exorbitantly, the contracts were. And so when they run out, the FEMA cliff hits, people are not going to be able to continue to renew under those, and they're going to have to leave. And you're going to see a lot of rental people are going to be turned out potentially. Or, you know, and the rental market itself will probably collapse as a result. But so the housing we're providing will be a critical component. FEMA is doing their own housing for their people, but again, they're kind of operating in a vacuum. But what we need to look forward to is trying to get these issues on what happens when the direct lease housing ends and what we can do, especially through the rental assistance programs, to try to bolster that effect.
Wow. Thank you, Angus, for that incredible response.
A little bit deep in the weeds. I kind of do that.
That's
answer that question.
But
I think it's important so people know as much as possible, and that's why these things here are great. You know, this is how it goes. Yep. You'll get the ringside view and the tail of the tape. your commentator and analysis person here, you may not like what happened. That's ridiculous. You know what, you may, at least you understand. You may love it. Who knows?
That's right.
You may be ambivalent.
So let's continue. Anne, you'll be next.
Yes, thank you for being such an advocate for Lahaina recovery efforts. And I know there's considerable trepidation about Lahaina town becoming the next Kaka'ako, if you guys don't know what that is. It's these massive luxury condo high rises before you get to Ala Moana area there, the Ala Moana Mall in Honolulu. My question's about the infrastructure. Why is it that for years now, we've been trying to get that Lahaina bypass finished? Like even, and then in Kihei, that north-south collector road, all that will alleviate traffic. And why is it we can't?
Well, this is part of my 17 years of, what made me happy was the fact that my career started with Dan Inouye saying I needed to run because we kept losing the money in the House of Representatives for all the defense federal monies he was putting in to start the bypass to begin with. And that's why I first ran. And Theo Morrison, we had Lahaina bypass now, and through, even though Lingle was a Republican, thanks to the cooperation of, Senator Dan and Ted Stevens, we were able to move. Then, we were able to move all of the phases. And now we're coming to a point because of the fire, the Lahaina bypass continuing on, Lahaina bypass B1B, or the northern extension, quite frankly, is being thwarted at the executive level of the DOT. That one person, for issues that are personal and reasons, does not want to move on, despite the fact that we put we earmarked federal money in the state budget, and it was on the state transportation improvement plan. And given that, if we can address the water issues, that's the area where housing is probably going to be able to come online insofar as non-brownfield housing. But all of these issues are why, and then we have we need the Lahaina bypass to continue. So unfortunately, this is where everybody out there in the audience can continue to use social media and groups and things like this to voice the displeasure of the fact that, despite different directors being in support of it, despite the fact the community needs it, it's an overwhelming thing, despite the fact it's been a commitment, the DOT's refusal to continue on is, disheartening, and is causing a lot of the damage here, but getting the Lahaina bypass right now, but for this, will continue to move in the northern direction. Now, the DOT will tell you we need to also go south. And I agree, we're going to have that strategy, especially Ukamehami side, of retreating out of that area. But there's a lot of issues. First, you got the wetland issue in Ukamehami because of the redefinition of wetlands under the Corps. Now, a lot of the area is potentially wetland. You have EV and other things along the proposed. There's 3 alignments that are proposed, but nothing that has been definitively, in my mind, been settled upon. And there's EISs and federal comment periods and everything else. Whereas I believe we'll be able to do more quicker by continuing to go north while we work on the issues facing us going south.
So to clarify, that's the decision is up to one person, the director.
Well, one person's blocking it, director of DOT.
Oh.
I mean, he's been, yeah, I'm sorry if he may get bummed out at what I'm saying, but it's the truth. And otherwise, all of this funding and support through the MPO, through the STIP, everything else, they should be moving forward on it. And, quite frankly, that's why everybody in the community is perplexed. And if you're just not going to do it at all, come out and say you're not going to do it. And this is why. And, at least then people understand where the battle lines are being drawn.
What, that was the same director of DOT that was addressing that roundabout and access to the the new Kihei High School?
Yep.
Oh. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
But you know what? It's not about one person. So that's why, appeal to the boss. This is where hopefully the governor and his administration will show the leadership of saying, okay, we are going to insist on execution. Here's the thing, the governor wants 1,000 more homes in that area. We're putting the modular housing. Without the Lahaina bypass north being extended, it's on the record, there will be no 1,000 homes. It's a false promise being offered. So, but with his support and leadership to make this happen, we'll now have the ability to bring on those extra houses, which are in dire need, not only for our Native Hawaiians, but also our non-blood quantum Native Hawaiians. And that's an area of housing I really want to try to draw attention to. I'm lucky, knock on wood, to be reapproved by my bosses out there, is that, we need to continue to be aggressive in, on what the department has done and doing, but we also should be trying to look at creating a housing opportunity, recognizing there's many Native Hawaiians out there who, through the generations and waiting on the list, no longer have the blood quantum. And they're owed, quite frankly. So.
And do you know why these, I heard that there were 500 homes direct lease through FEMA that were not occupied for several months. Is that because a lot of these homes are far from the west side? And that's why they're not.
No, there were actually a lot of the units were in West Maui. I think that's where a lot of the media you saw. You had units in West Maui, and the housing brokers were saying, well, you need to take this in haiku. And if you don't take it, it's a refusal. We're going to kick you out. And oh, by the way, I don't have a car anymore, and all this nagging realities, that come in why I can't take a place. And a lot of it was, and this is what the feds are pivoting. This is important to Paul's point. There are things now that have been changed about FEMA and SBA because of Lahaina that future disaster people won't go through. Case in point, with this disaster, everybody who needed help from FEMA had to go through SBA and get shot down for a loan, even though they know dang well, especially people getting PPP loans, that they weren't going to be able to qualify. And a FEMA, SBA denial on your credit score is like a nuclear bomb going off. And people's credit scores, in order to get FEMA and apply for grants, you had to get your credit rating destroyed through SBA along the way, even though you knew dang well it was going to happen. So now in future disasters, you can go right to FEMA if it's determined through a non-hard credit check that you probably won't qualify. See what I'm saying? That's like one thing, but look how many people now, that's the residual damage, the radiation you talk about. And then, and also one thing I want to bring up too, so many of our listeners know this, is that, and I knew this in the beginning, if we don't get on this, the damage will spread to people who weren't physically affected by the fire, who didn't live in Lahaina, but they're going to be having the impacts. And across the board, we've seen that happen.
And it's true, and it's been happening throughout our whole community too. So
yep, and meanwhile, and this is important for last session, there were times this last session where it was everybody in the world versus Maui, not just Lahaina. My friend from East Maui said it was Maui. You guys caused this. I'm not going to get a school in my community because you guys are sucking up all the money. We're spending. I think when the realization hit everybody here that the state was paying everything up cash up front. That would, and this is important. I'm going to do a real brief segue, but I think your viewers will find it interesting. This whole thing, so they understand what was basically happening was, imagine FEMA, somebody wants to take you out to dinner, and you're like, okay, let's go out to dinner. I'll pay the cash up front for the dinner, and you'll reimburse me, right? Well, the president said 100% reimbursement. Okay, so you'll reimburse the whole meal, the whole experience. We go out, we order some things, we order food, we order a couple of drinks. And everything, and then all of a sudden the person's like, okay, you put your cash out, here's all the cash for everything, and the person's like, whoa, wait a second, we don't reimburse for drinks. And you order dessert, and dessert's actually not a meal, so it's 50% off, and we don't tip, so that's not included either. So out of the $100, here's $20.
So there you go.
That is why there was such a financial crisis at the legislature, when it became evident to lawmakers that this hole in the budget was growing and growing, and the federal support that was being counted on was diminishing.
Well, again, the federal support also has to go to Ukraine and other places like that. So this is what we're stuck with, that reality. So let's move on with our next question with Bruce. Bruce?
Yes, Senator Angus.
Sure.
There was a bill that you introduced, or were a major part of introducing, that many people thought was taking the power of the decision of the future of Lahaina and the West Maui away from the locals and giving it to the state. And that was a perception many people had, and there was a big resistance and uproar to it. Would you please address what that bill was really all about and what your intentions and what were the results of it?
I would love to. And this is the reason why we need a year-long legislature. And so things like this can matriculate and percolate, especially in the time of trauma when people were still trying to heal and get immediate things addressed to. But it boils down to a fundamental thing. This was about actually trying to empower the community, to give them control over the resources and the money, and to eliminate jurisdictional lines that often gum up everything in government, especially in the time of a crisis. Decentralization of government to the community level, to me, is the most important thing. I saw decisions being made in Honolulu, D.C., and still do. You're going to see it play out through this whole thing. It's going on right now. And it was an attempt to start a discussion of what model of self-governance. How can, it all started with the poster after fire, let Lahaina lead. Well, what does that mean? Does it mean real leadership insofar as you control the money, you control the planning, you control everything at the local level to where there are no lines anymore? It's a community. It's a community. It's called community-based planning or community-based zoning. That's what it basically was, trying to find a way to do that. But there's a lot of governance issues involved in that, and they emerged. The first iteration of the bill was using the Community Development Authority as a model of what a community authority or governance structure could look like. Then everybody was upset in that, yeah, it appears that the governor is going to be calling the shots and stacking the deck with all of his own people. So in the next iteration of the bill, you turned into an elected board. You also had the redefinition, because the Lele, which was the original name, and I would call it the Lahaina Stewardship Authority if another discussion were held, but was Ahu Poaha system that didn't match up with any political subdivision, which made running any kind of elections or a kind of political system, if you were to base it on that kind of representation, very hard to do. So the next version was an elected one. You had it including basically matching the HRS definition of the Lahaina district, which was pretty much West Maui. And then you have parameters insofar as residency and everything else. But there were more issues still coming up, which is why this thing needed more time. We should have had a working group. I hope people will discuss it more. But my motives and everything like that was to let Lahaina lead, to put control back in, to stop the finger pointing between government when you have resource decisions being made that infect everybody, the end user in the community. And it's come up over and over again, especially with the Planning Commission and the Planning Department. You're going to see those with the means are going to get the ability to rebuild faster and make zoning changes that are going to affect people around them. So you see this discoordination is going to be hurting the community and potentially changing it in all the ways that you talked about earlier, right? The kaka'ako. So that's what I was trying to do, and again, I did this in the past when I worked as a staffer. It was called the Lahaina District. And of course, the county was furious back then as they were now. I mean, to the county, it represents the greatest threat because you're basically now taking most of what's in Lahaina infrastructure and stuff would affect, if it was truly holistic as it should have been, it would have involved those assets by the county being run by the community. But part of why the bill needed work and was failing, it was only state assets, and there's really like nothing in West Maui that the state has under its jurisdiction other than the schools, the highway, and ceded lands, which of course belong to the Hawaiian people. So that's what I tried to do, and again, what's great about the democratic process, and many of my friends, like the guys over here, they were not fans, right? Not fans. But as we got to talk and discuss it, I think the general consensus is it needs more time and involvement, and on the backdrop of trauma and financial ruin, it's better just to, hit the brakes for now and let people talk about it. And that's what's great about the election process. And I know my opponent's probably going to be talking about it, and I welcome it because it just came up in a meeting where somebody from Wailea lamented, why can't we have controlling decisions over what happens in our backyard? Why can't we decide North-South Connector Road? Why can't we decide that the programmatic revenue coming in is put out in where the community wants? If you had a community-based authority for South Carolina, for Kihei, you could take that programmatic highway money coming in and you could basically make that the numero uno and push it forward. And you'd have the county planning agencies now working in conjunction with the planners from the state, which are now one entity, right? using the CDA, I'll just leave it at this, was to create an administrative spine. Because at the end of the day, you're going to need support of planners, of administrators, and everything else to actually make it functional. And that was an idea, like, it's already established. The CDAs they work with now, they literally have no policy involvement, zero. And we brought them out to the community several times. Theo Morrison yelled at them the last time, you know. But Craig and his team are committed to demystifying, letting people understand that if the community chooses to, for self-empowerment and self-governance, to go this route, that they're there to provide a structure, a professional support, so that it actually can execute what needs to be done, if it ever came to be, which it did.
Would you reintroduce this in the next council session? If
A
so,
working
how would you
group,
change
probably.
it?
I would do it as a working group, I think, from the word go. Because I think it deserves normally you start off with the bill itself, you know, and I would try to, so much has been learned. Like, for instance, one of the things that came up that, you know, I think if we were to start from that direction, it'd probably be a working group. But if it started off from a policy direction, is that if you have some hybrid of elected and appointed, you can ensure proportional representation from all groups. And this was one of the people from one of the boards and commissions came in, really good guy from Hilo, and we talked about this, and he was fascinated by the whole thing, and he brought that up. You know, you need to have that kind of, you need to get that to happen. And so I thought to myself, you know, you have an elected board, but you could have a board where all one interest predominates. You could have, without a public financing structure, you could have many married things that all of a sudden, but if you have an appointed board, you can guarantee there will be 2 Native Hawaiians on it every time. There will be 2 people from the Lahaina business district resident for 20 years. There'll be, you know what I'm saying? But then how do you validate them with the community? And so that's, I think, what I was kind of trying to brainstorm out was a hybrid system. But, you know, that coming up is a good point about the governance structure, you know? You make it elected, but do you now wipe out proportional representation? Do you now create something that could disenfranchise Native Hawaiians, or Filipino community, environmental community, business community? So,
give me a quick summary of elevator pitch. If someone comes up to you and says, you supported a bill, you created a bill that was going to take power away from the people, what would be your elevator pitch answer to that?
You're wrong. Read the latest version of the bill. It wouldn't have. It was an attempt to restore power back to the people, because giving money and control to the community where all those decisions take place in your backyard and your Safeway, the people serving on them are not elected governors from far off places. They're people who you're going to run into. That's what it's about. If you got a better way to create that, because that is letting Lahaina lead, I'm all ears. That's the main thing. I'm all ears. You got a better plan. I'm never once said it's got to be this and only this, but you gotta start somewhere.
Thank you.
You know, too many times, I mean, with all the polar social media and stuff, I could have easily been children. So I'm like, no, you know what? We've got to create an environment where people can have discussions and dream a little, and you know, and get emotional and have at it, but know that when I go to a supermarket, I'll stop naming their name or something. You know, I can run into you and go, and I've had, you know, my friends from Lahaina Strong stuff. We've had some pretty wild conversations and stuff, but they understand where my heart is at. I think that's the big thing that they got. There was no malevolent intention to control through the vast power scheme, some unnamed force in a mountain somewhere. Just me, myself, wanting to have all the control in Lahaina, because if we had the money and control in Lahaina, so much would have been done immediately, which would have stemmed a lot of the financial bleeding. And it continues. This discordance, especially with planning and zoning, with the first come, first serve, with working groups that are basically have most of the people on them are outside entities and corporations. They have access to the one person at the top right now who, with the legislature being out of session, it's pretty much, that's the only voice in the room.
Well, certainly that's something that we have to keep on looking at in terms of empowering our community. And let's continue on. Asia, you want to ask the next question?
Yeah, I really appreciate your viewpoint on that. It was nice hearing your take on it. Not to shift gears, because I think it's actually in the same ballpark, but talk to me about water. I mean, you're in a unique position. And I'm talking about freshwater. Don't talk to me about saltwater.
No.
Yeah, that's all
I mean,
another-
we have all the desal, of course. That's but that's a whole nother conversation. Again, we could really chew up a lot of time if we wanted to. We'll have to seriously. I hope you guys do some of these deeper dive and like have random candidates just kind of come in and out and just throw them. And that's one of them because the county did bring it up. I have a reso on that. But freshwater, go ahead.
So talk to me about what you see as like an ideal future. I mean, you're in a unique position because you're in the state government, which controls an aspect of water, and the county controls an aspect, and then we have all these private corporations. So where do you see the path forward, especially now that Lahaina's just been thrown upside down?
I think, especially with cooperative agreements, which all governments do, that could have been the strength of a community stewardship authority. And but I think we need to we have to make public these privately held water resources. You can't have an integral water management plan because ideally, and everybody supports it, it's going to be a heavy lift. I was told $100 million to connect the Lahaina system to the Kaanapali system, but if we have them all under public, if we have them all under public, ownership domain, and we can connect these systems, we'll be able to balance water moving around. But we have the other issue, which is of course water availability, and the role of the Commission on Water Resource Management, CWRM, as it's known. CWRM, they put West Maui under water management area. They're not allowing any new wells to be drilled. I mean, we have housing that was needed before the fire. If we're going to provide any housing, we need water. There are some allocation issues that I think could be addressed by CWRM, but CWRM itself is bound to it because they cannot take any requests out of order. And as a result, any request to reallocate unused water for housing, which is not being used at all, is going to take a long time for CWRM to get to it because of all the other cases in front of it. So I'm hoping that's one place which would be kind of a way where CWRM could statutorily be empowered as an emergency only take an application like that. But we also need to look again to detail what are the future generation going to be. Mandating R1 and insisting that all R1 infrastructure be prioritized when the funding, to me, is a way to generate, especially with some of the users that need R1 and want it, like the golf courses, and can't get it. But also, if we're going to need to also look at generation, like something like desalination, as well as more aggressive water recapture strategies. To me, one of the big things for South Maui is how much you have public infrastructure that's basically failing and leaking. So you have salt water coming in and fresh water coming out. I guess a lot of sand gets processed at some of these wastewater plant facilities. And so I think we need to do an aggressive strategic reallocation, a plan of how much is truly being, coming in that's being processed and how much is being wasted and what areas can we address insofar as replacing now. Every little drop counts, every little strategy, even if it may not be enough, on its own, will be a meaningful way to try to address water use. That's just some of my thoughts on that. So
just kind of a follow up on that. As a state senator, for example, the community has come and said, hey, some of these private users, we have proof of their waste and we have proof of their lack of keeping this water, being good stewards over the water that they have. The state, it kind of falls on deaf ears when we bring these things to the state.
Yeah, because
so as a state senator, where can you see that?
Well, yeah, that's why we got to make them public. I think ADC would be good, but if they're all in the county water system, you now have all this oversight. Right now, private water systems only have the public utilities connected. That's it. And the community's right, especially when it comes to data collection. We've heard from CWRM staffers themselves. Right. It's like it should be very veneer and very easy and technologically. To me, though, the public trust doctrine, the public good, is an integrated system to service and work in harmony with an integrated watershed Ahupua'a system. Right. And that's critical. So that's why, to me, it's a non-negotiable. We need to. I'm glad the council, given props, have started conversations with one of the private water system people about acquisition. So I mean, it's like I said, hey, getting the ball rolling. If I'm reelected, knock on wood, The people send me back. I am going to continue to fight on the governance side, as well as, for us to be able to make this happen, because it's a critical need, and the fires just really exacerbated the whole crisis.
Great. Thank you for that, Angus. And I'll ask the next question, because you've been such an advocate for really having more home rule, in terms of having the county be empowered, the residents be empowered in your area. And again, right now we're facing with an education system where we have primarily it be directed by a group that's in Oahu. We're the only state in the United States, from what I understand, that doesn't have county representatives in the school boards. So what would you do to help empower our communities, to help us so that we can really revamp and really support our education system that desperately needs it?
We need a full-on remodeling of county state government completely, because the financing system upon which it's built is arcane and failed and doesn't exist anymore. And now all the holes have come out over the years. I mean, there's a lot that the state does that in other places municipalities do, and schools are one of them, education. The three biggest drivers on the state budget are basically incarcerate, medicate, and educate. Public safety in prisons, county functions in every other state, schools, every other state is a county function. And of course you have the medical systems, which are not state delivered. The delivery systems are pretty much done at the municipal level. Those are the three big drivers, but a lot of the property tax in Maui, in the counties, have created an incentive for offshore speculators to come, and they don't pay state income tax. The GET is not a really good way to get the contributions needed, which is why so we need to look at both resource sharing and cost sharing, and that comes to education. We need a decentralized education. We need to make it so that we have more of it occurring on the county level as far as operations go, as far as the schools go. But we also need funding support too. And the teachers supported an idea to look at the property tax, increasing it only on speculator-based activity, non-primary residents, to provide a way for funding for schools that keikis deserve. There was a lot of opposition by the county of it, but it underscores the fact the plantation economy, of which the structure between the state and the county and how it is gone, and we now have an economy that where you have a lot of speculation going on in there, and there needs to be a way to share the resources and share also the control and the ability. The more highways is another one. All the highways, in my mind, should be transferred over to the counties. There should be one highway, and that's it. And so whether it's a state highway or there's north-south collector road, a county road, or if it's between, it's going to be handled at one level. But then the revenue sources also have to follow as well. So it's a long conversation. It's a very involved one. Some of my colleagues have introduced it in the past and kind of got beat up for the whole idea. But we need to have local control, but we also need to have the ability to generate local support through these tax systems so that we can have, at the end of the day, who wins? The keiki win. We got better schools, better paid teachers, better support from counselors and other support positions, right? So, but I agree, the more we can decentralize it now through structural changes, governmental changes, I think is better. But we should also have really tough conversations about the revenue side of things and the service side of things.
Great. Thank you for that, Angus. And yes, more home rule, especially around
Yeah,
education.
you guys have to fly over here for this.
Yeah. And so, Anne, you want to ask the next? We've been going for quite some time now, so we'll make these questions fairly brief. Okay.
Okay. So, I just have a question about minimum wage, living wage. And they passed that bill Senate Bill 789 about advancing the minimum wage over years. But I mean, people have trouble making ends meet on what the minimum wage is. I mean, there's 31% of full-time workers that fall below the living wage of $35,400 for a single person. Family with two two adults and 2 children, the living wage is 72,000. And then that's more than double the US family poverty level of 27,890. Now, I know that a lot of business owners, particularly small business owners, say that that would break them. They wouldn't be able to maintain their business if the minimum wage was increased. I think DBED says you need to make as a 17 right now. A single person.
Yeah, but it's actually already happening.
$17 an hour.
The irony is that the marketplace of people are not going to work for the minimum wage. You're not going to get employees. You will drive everywhere around Maui. You'll see signs on vans and everything. Come on in, $25, $20, what bonus? Well, it's engineered by the fact that if employers say it'll break us, but then you're not going to have any employees and you're going to have to shut your business down. So at the end of the day, and that's what I'm seeing happen everywhere. You have this new, what's pushing wages into living wages is a lack of employees who cannot, to your point, work for minimum wage. And
so many of these people,
and the rise of the gig economy, of course, along with it.
And what happens is those people that are really hurting rely on government and nonprofit, like, what is it? Food stamps, government subsidies. So
those who take the minimum wage jobs are, have to do that to make ends meet, but I see people quitting out all the time. One of the coffee shops down there near Lahaina, employees come in, they're there for the bonus period, and as soon as the bonus period ends, and they're out, and they're working 2 or 3 other jobs at the same time, but they're all being paid. The employees tell me we're paying them $20 an hour, because if they didn't pay them $20 an hour, they literally would have to close their doors because they would have no employees. Employees are, it's not, they're like, well, I'm going to get a job on the other side because there is somebody there that's going to pay $20 an hour. But what's real, to your point though, Ann, what's really, government to me needs a second round of a stimulus thing. We're facing a new pandemic called hyperinflation.
Oh, what? Sorry.
Hyperinflation.
Yes.
And the purchasing power of the dollar since the end of COVID has dropped 25%.
Wow.
And that's a nationwide, that's higher here. I'm going to have to follow with David about this. But I haven't toyed with the idea of advocating for some kind of a company store system where if you're a working local person, you had access to products at a reasonable price, where the government would step in and provide some sort of stabilization. One of the people that backing my friend up there from South Maui, who called me a raving socialist communist, and I said, well, I guess I'm pretty red, because this is the facts and the reality. If not for government, who or what is going to step in to stabilize this thing? Because what's going to happen if left unchecked by laissez-faire is you're going to have, like the fall of the Roman Empire, a overloaded, bloated upper class, a very destitute lower class, and nothing in between, and collapse is inevitable.
I think we're approaching that quickly.
We already are. That's the thing.
Yeah,
right. This is a emergency situation. Government has to step in. And my friend said from Manoa, this is a local accountant friend who gives me a hard time all the time. He goes, I was a parochial SOB when I was in the House. And he goes, we were called now more than ever. We got to be like that. And we got to, when it comes to resource allocation, quite frankly, we got to take care of local people and the most vulnerable. But it's gotten to a point where, and that's why the biggest thing that happened last session, I'll be quick because I know we have to go on to questions, is that middle class income tax relief bill that we passed, which was 30 years overdue, was huge because it captured the reality that most people to survive have to make more than what's considered lower income, to which most tax relief is direct. So if we can get more, when the Fed guys come in, if Jill comes in and talks to you guys, that we got to continue to bust their chops about getting the federal government to relax these criteria so people in Hawaii can truly be reflected for what it is to live in Hawaii.
Great.
Yes.
300% FPL equals 150 for a mainland person.
Right.
So
thank you.
Thank you for that. And Bruce, you'll be the last question.
All right. My question is going to be about rent stabilization. There's a movement afoot here in Maui to do rent controls. It's being called rent stabilization here to deal with the rent problem. And that has positive, negative effects, repercussions. What is your view on your support or non-support of rent stabilization?
Well, I'm glad it's being taken up at the county level because that's where, again, it should be decided. There were bills on the state level. We try to focus on using the emergency proclamation process as a way to stabilize rents. In the bill that I guess myself and my friend from Wahiawa were working on, we tied it to allow the council to make adjustments based upon local criteria, including, CPI and other things, to allow for reasonable return, understanding, to your point, Bruce, that there could be an unintended consequence of people just, refusing to do long-term rentals. And, but at the same time, what I think we need to do is we have hyper rental thanks to the housing brokers and the STR day rates. We need immediate cap on long-term rentals, but we also need to continue to provide mechanisms, and hopefully the county will put money into MEO and some of these mechanisms whereby landlords are incentivized to want to rent. They're actually out there beating the bushes for a long-term rental because there's going to be certain things. The county did it to get people in emergency housing with the property tax program. Maybe that's something they can fine tune for long-term rentals. If you as a landowner know that you're going to be getting certain kinds of things by doing the right thing, which you should do anyway, but if it takes that to do it, open up inventory, then I think that will allow us to introduce rent control, understanding that in order to get this benefit, you need to allow your rents to be controlled and set them at a certain level. And then we have the overlay of the landlord tenant code, of course, too, which we just improved this year by putting more protections in. One of the things as a sidebar is important that we're going to continue which was successful, is the mandatory mediation program between landlords and tenants that we had during COVID, make it permanent. So, but we need something now because it's a guy from FEMA, head of FEMA told me, you guys need rent control yesterday. And I go, oh yeah, that's because you guys are paying Airbnb rates to everybody now. And and that's why I was so upset when that first got announced. I told one of the people in the state, I said, you just destroyed the rental market in Maui, like doing this. And the dominoes fall. And so what I would tell people who are long-term renters and those have concerns, I get them, but we need to do something to stabilize the market. And then we need to prepare for the FEMA cliff that's going to basically hit us when you have all of these direct lease programs ending at the same time.
So thank you for that, Angus. And certainly there's so many
real quick
questions.
add on.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
For mixed use and adaptive reuse, that you need to basically make it a criteria if you're going to allow, if people are going to redevelop to that effect, that they have to make the units available for long-term rental based on a county formula. You want the permits to redo it, you will get to the front of the line to redo it, but if you go to the front of the line, any units created a long-term rental, you're going to redo this formula. That's, I think, the most important thing hopefully the county will turn on right there.
Well, again, thank you so much for being a representative for us for so long, Angus. And again, the challenges keep on coming through. Greatly appreciate your time for this interview. Let people really understand and know some of the challenges that we face here in our county. And really, that's what the Maui Pono Network is about, to really help educate our community in terms of not only these challenges, but the candidates that can also help make a difference, those that really support the people in the Āina. So again, thank you for watching, and we'll be continuing our process as we continue interviews for the 2024 elections. You'll be receiving actually your ballots in the mail the end of July for the primary. So again, and the primary is very important for our state elections also, where we determine who will represent the Democratic side also, which is very important, and Republican and Green. So again, thank you for becoming informed. Spread the word for other people so that they can be informed voters also. Mahalo.
Aloha, thank you for having us.
Thank you, Angus.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Aloha. Bug me anytime.